It is January 18th, 2026. Most of the world is still clinging to New Year's resolutions, distracted by the noise of a new calendar. But while the masses were looking at the fireworks, the architects of the financial system were moving the pillars, and the consequences of what they just did won't hit the news, they'll hit your bank account. You are feeling the calm before a storm that has already been gathered. On December 1st, a cycle that lasted years came to an abrupt, silent end. The Federal Reserve officially terminated its campaign of quantitative tightening, QT. To the average person, these are just hollow financial syllables. To the sovereign, this is the signal that the system has stopped trying to fight the fire and is preparing to pour more gasoline. To understand the danger of this moment, you must first strip away the complexity of their lies. You must understand the drug that built the world you live in. Quantitative easing, QE. When the economy breathes its last gasps, when businesses fail and the gears of consumption grind to a halt, the Fed plays God. They wave a magic wand and slash interest rates. They make debt feel like a gift. They encourage you to spend money you haven't earned to buy things you don't need, all to keep a dying engine running. But what happens when the wand breaks? What happens when interest rates are already at the floor and the engine still won't turn? That is when the true deception begins. The money printer. This channel exists for people who want to see what happens next, not just what already happened. If that's you, stay close. In the simple language of the elite, QE is when the Fed creates digital capital out of absolute nothingness. They don't just lower the cost of money, they flood the system with it. They enter the market as a ghost buyer, snatching up trillions in bonds and assets, forcing interest rates down by sheer artificial force. Look at the scale of this intervention. In early 2020, the Fed's balance sheet sat at a staggering $4.2 trillion, a number already bloated by decades of mismanagement. Then the magic happened. Within 2 years, they aggressively scooped up an additional $4.8 trillion. By early 2022, they were sitting on a $9 trillion mountain of debt. They told you it was to save the economy. They told you it was for the people. But ask yourself this: if money can be summoned with a keystroke in a basement in Washington, why are you still trading the best years of your life, your health, and your time for a handful of it? The truth is, QE was never about saving you. It was about saving the system. It was the greatest heist in human history, a silent wealth transfer that inflated the assets of the few while devaluing the labor of the many. But let's look at the weight of this operation. In early 2020, the Fed's balance sheet was already a bloated $4.2 trillion. It had remained stagnant for years. Then the emergency began. In a move of calculated aggression, they scooped up an additional $4 trillion in assets. By early 2022, the system was carrying a $9 trillion mountain of debt. They didn't just print currency. They re-engineered reality. They jump-started a lagging economy by sacrificing the future value of your labor. But every action has a consequence, and this is where the story turns dark for the average person. Welcome to the K-shaped recovery, a tale of two separate civilizations living under one flag. Look at the upward line. These are the victors of the Fed's intervention. The rich, the asset class, the ones who don't work for money, but own the machines that produce it. To understand the magnitude of their gain, look at the walls around you. Historically, housing prices climbed at a steady 5%, a manageable pace for the working class. But in 2021, the line broke. Prices spiked by 13%. In 2022, they surged by another 18%. Why? Because when the system makes borrowing nearly free for the elite, they don't buy bread. They buy the world. They bought the houses you were saving for. They turned the American dream into an inaccessible asset class, leaving the rest of you to pay their mortgages through rent. The stock market followed the same corrupted script. The S&P 500, the index of the 500 largest engines of the system, historically returned 7 to 10%. Yet, in a world that was supposedly falling apart, it returned 18% in 2020 and a staggering 28% in 2021. The logic was simple and brutal. When interest rates die, assets fly. Businesses didn't grow because they were more productive. They grew because they could borrow for nothing to buy back their own shares. The result? More millionaires were minted faster than at any point in human history. Not through innovation, but through positioning. When the Fed prints, the rich get richer by default. And while they were celebrating their newfound wealth, a silent tax was being prepared for everyone else. Now, look at the other side of the divide, the downward sloping line. While the elite were toasting to their newfound millions, this line represents the reality of the majority majority. It represents the average Joe. It represents the person who follows the rules, works the hours, and trusts the system. In the language of the sovereign, this isn't just a chart, it's a record of a harvest. How did this happen? It's simple mathematics. When the Fed injected those trillions into the money system, they didn't create wealth, they diluted it. Inflation, which sat at a dormant 0% in mid-2020, didn't just rise, it skyrocketed. By June 2022, it touched 9%. Everything, your groceries, your fuel, the very roof over your head became 9% more expensive in the blink of an eye. But the numbers get darker. The Bureau of Labor Statistics revealed the true crime. Between 2021 and 2022, real average weekly earnings actually fell by 3%. Think about the brutality of that statement. You went to work, you gave your life, your energy, and your time. And at the end of the year, the system decided that your effort was worth 3% less than the year before, while the cost of surviving rose by 9%. You didn't stay in the same place. You were robbed. The point is this: in a world of infinite money printing, labor is a losing game. If you did not invest, you became poor by default. Your salary could not keep up. Your savings were eaten alive in their bank vault. You were effectively left behind while the asset-owning class used your loss to fund their gain. Understand this clearly. When the world gets more expensive, the rich don't suffer. They own the companies that raise the prices. They own the assets that benefit from the inflation. They are the ones who thrive in the chaos, while the non-investor is slowly erased from the middle class. Eventually, even the architects of the system realized they had pushed the deception too far. In 2022, as the cries of the public grew louder and the inflation fire began to burn out of control, the Fed panicked. They realized they had to put out the flame they had ignited. This was the birth of quantitative tightening, QT, the opposite of the drug, the beginning of the withdrawal. By 2022, the system's architects realized the fire they had started was threatening to consume the entire house. They had to act. They switched from the drug of QE to the bitter medicine of quantitative tightening, QT. The goal was simple: choke the flow of money. They stopped the printing presses. They stopped buying bonds. They let their existing hoard of assets expire, effectively sucking the lifeblood, the excess cash out of the economy. It was a period of calculated pain, designed to drive interest rates up and force the world to spend less. Look at the scale of this withdrawal. From the $9 trillion peak in early 2022, they managed to bleed the balance sheet down to roughly $6.5 trillion by the end of 2025. That is $2.4 trillion removed from the global nervous system, a massive number, yet still nowhere near the levels of the world we once knew. Which brings us to where we stand today, on January 18th, 2026. On December 1st, the Fed made a move that signaled the end of this era. They officially halted their QT efforts. The tightening is over. The sovereigns of the world understand that this wasn't a choice made out of strength, but out of necessity. There are three primary reasons why they decided to stop the withdrawal. First, they claim victory over the inflation monster. They've managed to cool the 9% peak down to 3%. But remember, 3% inflation on top of the already inflated prices of 2022 doesn't mean things are getting cheaper. It just means the pace of your destruction has slowed down. Second, the gears of the banking system began to grind. Bank reserves, the literal liquidity that keeps the lights on, reached a dangerously low level. If the Fed continued to shrink the balance sheet, the very banks you trust with your savings would find themselves in a liquidity trap. Imagine walking into your branch to reclaim your labor, only to be told the vault is dry. The system cannot afford that level of transparency. Third, the cracks are appearing in the job market. The economic data shows a slowing engine. Companies that were built on the back of cheap artificial debt can no longer survive in a high-interest world. The Fed is hoping that by stopping the tightening, they can re-inject enough grease into the system to prevent a total labor collapse. But here is the most important distinction you must understand. The masses believe that because the Fed stopped QT, they are automatically going to start printing trillions again tomorrow through QE. They are wrong. In the architect's toolbox, these are two entirely different instruments. Stopping the withdrawal is not the same as starting the injection. We are currently in the waiting room, a period of eerie silence before the next major manipulation begins. The question is, do you have the clarity to see what they are preparing for next? Let's be clear. Stopping the withdrawal of money is one thing. Starting the injection is another. In the architect's toolbox, these tools have different weights. But don't let the technical silence fool you. The trajectory has already been set. Look at the timeline. December 1st, the tightening stops. December 10th, the Fed announces the third consecutive interest rate cut. Why? Because the cracks in the labor market are becoming canyons. The system is trying to throw a lifeline to companies that can no longer survive without the oxygen of cheap debt. But there is a conflict within the walls of the Eccles building. Internally, the Fed is fractured. They claim they will pause further cuts to wait for data. They want you to believe they are in control. They want you to believe they are still the independent guardians of the economy. But independence is a ghost story, they tell the public, to keep the markets calm. We are approaching a critical threshold. May 2026, the end of Jerome Powell's term. In the world of the sovereign, there are no coincidences, only moves on a chessboard. Trump has already signaled his intent. He doesn't want a guardian. He wants a yes man. He wants an architect who will not hesitate to slash rates into the dirt, regardless of the long-term destruction it causes to your purchasing power. Normally, the Fed is supposed to be insulated from political pressure. It is designed to balance the cold, hard data of the economy against the volatile whims of the presidency. But as we move closer to May 2026, that insulation is melting. While the Fed chair doesn't act alone, surrounded by regional bank presidents, the appointment of a new leader is a declaration of intent. It is the moment the system officially stops pretending to be a neutral arbiter and becomes a direct instrument of political will. If the person at the helm is willing to prioritize short-term market euphoria over the structural integrity of the dollar, the floodgates will not just open, they will be torn down. We are witnessing the slow death of the Fed's autonomy, and when the guardrails are removed, the only thing left to do is prepare for the acceleration. The stage is being set for a final, massive wave of liquidity. The question is not whether it will happen, but whether you will be standing in its path or riding the wave with the elite. Part 6. The Trojan Horse and the Final Warning. The appointment of a yes man at the head of the table is only half the story. The other half is already unfolding in the dark. On December 11th, the Fed quietly introduced a new acronym into our lives. RMP, Reserve Management Purchases. They are quick to tell you that this is not QE. They use technical jargon to build a wall between their actions and your understanding. They claim RMP is a sterile tool designed only to maintain liquidity and meet naturally growing demand. They are buying short-term treasury bills instead of long-term bonds. But let's look past the nomenclature. Whether they call it quantitative easing or reserve management, the result is identical. The Fed is expanding its balance sheet. They are injecting billions of digital dollars into the veins of the financial system. If it walks like a printer and talks like a printer, it is a printer. The system is playing a dangerous game of semantics. While they promise they are not printing money to stimulate the economy, they are adding liquidity to keep the banks from collapsing. For you, the result is the same. More money chasing the same amount of goods. I won't tell you that RMP will with 100% certainty trigger a hyperinflationary collapse tomorrow. No one can claim that. But I will tell you this. The K-shaped recovery is about to get much, much steeper. When interest rates fall, whether through official cuts or the stealthy effects of RMP, inflation doesn't just go away. It waits. It creeps back into your grocery bill, your rent, and your gas tank. We have seen this movie before. We know how it ends. Your savings are the primary target. If you have $10,000 sitting in a bank account earning a pathetic 3% while the real inflation rate climbs back to 4 or 5%, you are not saving. You are bleeding. You are losing wealth every single second you remain in cash. And don't wait for a raise to save you. History proves that wages are the last thing to rise and the first thing to be eaten by the system's appetite. So, how do you survive the year 2026? You stop being the victim of the cycle and start being a participant in the growth. You must move from the downward line of the K-shape to the upward line. You must become an owner of assets. Whether it is the stock market, real estate, or hard assets, you need a shield that grows faster than they can print. The most important thing isn't the amount. You don't need a fortune to start. You can start with $10, $5, or even $1. The most important thing is to cross the line from worker to investor. The severity of the fallout depends on one thing: how deep the Fed is willing to go with these RMP purchases. But for you, the nuance doesn't matter as much as the result. In my view, the K-shaped recovery, the literal dividing line between the new elite and the disappearing middle class, is about to widen into a canyon. Here is the brutal logic of what comes next. First, when interest rates fall, whether by decree or by the stealth of RMP, inflation doesn't stay dormant. It breathes. It creeps. Borrowing becomes cheap, the money supply swells, and sellers respond by raising the price of existence. insurance, your groceries, your rent, your fuel, they are all about to get more expensive. We have seen this script before. We know how the movie ends for those who aren't prepared. Second, your savings are being targeted. If you have $10,000 sitting in a bank account earning a stagnant 3%, while the real cost of living climbs by 4 or 5%, you aren't saving. You are being taxed by the minute. You are effectively losing the value of your labor every single year you remain in cash. Third, the system is not coming to save you. We will not see raises fast enough to keep pace with the theft of inflation. If you trade your time for a fixed salary, you are playing a game designed for you to lose. Right now, the world is full of experts claiming to know exactly what will happen. They are lying. No one has 100% certainty. But the sovereign does not wait for certainty. The sovereign prepares for probability. The probability is this: over the next few years, interest rates will fall and the value of the currency will be sacrificed to keep the engine running. In that world, the investor thrives and the non-investor is harvested. History has shown us time and again those who own the assets get richer and those who own nothing but their labor get poorer. This is why I advocate for the stock market as a primary shield. It is the easiest way to ensure your wealth grows faster than they can print. You don't need a fortune to start. You don't need to be part of the 1% to act like them. You can start with $10, $5, or even a single dollar. The world of 2026 will be defined by who owns and who owes. If you're wondering how to take that first step and build real long-term wealth, stay close. I'll show you exactly what to buy, when to buy it, and how to survive the Great Divide. The system is moving. It's time you moved too. This is the Sovereign. I'll see you in the next video.